What does it say?
It says,
Oh,
where's my?
mhm.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual forum of civil detention. So we're doing this because we want everyone to understand what civil detention is. And here to help us explain what it is our panelists. Okay, we have Tim of Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, Hannah of Legal Services, Alejandra of Global Advocacy, and Helena, University of Washington Center for Human Rights, and Aaron for Communities of a Healthy Bay. And she explained the language. We're going to have simultaneous interpretation.
The interpreter needs interpretation turned off.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Hello, everyone. My name is Barbara, and alongside my co-interpreter, Martin, will be providing simultaneous interpretation from English to Spanish and vice versa today. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Bárbara y junto con mi co-intérprete Martín vamos a estar proveyendo interpretación simultánea del inglés al español durante esta reunión. I'm first going to go over the instructions on how to access the interpretation equipment, and then we'll review some quick best practices, and then we'll start the webinar. Primero voy a repasar brevemente cómo acceder al equipo de interpretación. Después hablaremos de mejores prácticas para el uso del equipo e iniciaremos la reunión. So first, if you're joining from your computer, you're going to see on the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom toolbar an option that says interpretation and has a globe icon. Please click on there if you are not bilingual in English and Spanish, so that you could access interpretation and hear it when you need it for this meeting. If we could go to the next slide, please. Si se están uniendo, if you're joining from a smartphone, then you'll see on the bottom right-hand corner 3 dots that say more. Click on there, and there you'll get the option for language interpretation, and you'll choose the language you want to hear this in. Again, if you're not bilingual in English and Spanish, we ask that you please select the language. Next slide, please. Entonces, si se están uniendo de su celular, les pedimos que por favor hagan clic en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla donde dice more o más. Ahí pueden elegir el idioma en el que quieren escuchar esta reunión. Si se están uniendo de su computadora, les pedimos que por favor vayan a la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla donde van a ver un icono de globo terráqueo. Ahí podrán hacer clic ahí y elegir la opción para el idioma en el que quieran escuchar esta reunión. Brevemente voy a repasar primero en inglés y después en español las mejores prácticas y después iniciaremos la reunión. So I'm briefly going to go over best practices and then we'll start the meeting and the interpretation function. So please remember to speak one person at a time and keep your mic muted if you're not speaking. Por favor recuerden hablar una persona a la vez y mantener su micrófono en modo mudo si no están hablando. Please speak closely to your microphone so we can hear you. Por favor, hablen cerca a su micrófono para que podamos escucharle. Please speak at a moderate pace and take pause at the end of each sentence so that we could capture adequately what's being said. Por favor, hablen a un paso moderado y tomen pausa después de cada oración, así podemos interpretar adecuadamente lo que se está diciendo. Y por último, si están teniendo algún problema técnico con el equipo de interpretación, por favor, déjenos saber por chat. También estén pendientes del chat porque ahí es donde nosotros como intérpretes podemos dejarles saber si estamos teniendo problemas con el equipo de interpretación. Lastly, please remember to speak at a moderate pace, take a pause, and if you're having technical problems, please let us know in the chat box. That's also where we as interpreters will be able to let you know if we're having issues or if we need you to slow down. So please look out for the chat box. Y con eso vamos a iniciar el equipo de interpretación ahora. Entonces que tengan una buena reunión y déjenos saber si tienen algún problema en el chat. With that, we're going to go on and turn on the interpretation equipment now and get the meeting started. Please let us know if you're having any technical issues in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. So language is now on. Please choose your languages. And before we start, we just want everyone to know that we are outside of the Northwest Detention Center right now in Tacoma. And later we will have a rally at 7 p.m. So please come out if you can. Now we're gonna pass it to Tim so that he can explain to us what civil private detention is.
Thanks so much, Shakori. So my name is Tim Worden-Hertz. I use he and pronouns. I'm a directing attorney at the Northwest Human Rights Project. Excited to be here. As you can see from the photos, and certainly as folks have who've been in it and folks who've experienced it, you know, the Northwest Detention Center looks like a prison. It feels like a prison, and it's modeled on a maximum security prison. And so sort of the question is like, you know, if those are all true, right, why is it legally categorized as civil detention? And sort of legally that story goes back to essentially about 1893, the Supreme Court in a case called Feng Yu Ting, which comes from, and again, I think so many things about immigration, you know, come from this sort of racist story in United States history. So Feng Yu Ting came about after the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act in the late 1800s. And Feng Yu Ting, the case is about someone they were trying to deport because he hadn't registered with a white witness. You needed a white witness at the time to be able to do that. Feng Yu Ting and the other two folks who had been locked up and were going to be deported said, well, no, we should do the rights that that we should have as if you're charged with a crime in the United States. We should get those protections. We're not even given those. We weren't even given any hearing. And the Supreme Court then said, no, this is not criminal, it's civil. And sort of that ruling, coming from, again, that sort of awful racist history, is sort of what has carried through. And that's still how the courts think about immigration detention as civil, as something that is in theory just to secure your appearance at a future court date and not as a punishment. And just sort of, for me, one of these points of emphasis is I think folks who don't understand what an actual detention center is like, I think it doesn't make sense. It's hard to line up the realities of what an immigration detention center, is like and what the experience is like for the folks who are locked up with what the law says about it. And I had a professor in law school who was a brilliant constitutional scholar. And she was telling us about immigration and how immigration detention is civil. Someone asked her what an immigration detention is like, and she said, well, it's civil, it's not criminal, so it must be something like a hotel. because it's got to be very different than a prison, which is what criminal detention is like. Obviously, that's completely wrong, but I think emphasizes, for me at least, right, how different the legal framework is around calling something civil with the realities of what an immigration detention center is, which is, a prison in many ways. And so I just, the detention center here in Tacoma is one of many around the country. Right now, there's over 20,000 people held in civil immigration detention around the country. Again, these are not folks who are charged with any crime, but just being held in theory while they go through the immigration court process. Around 80% of those held nationally are held in privately run facilities, like the one in Tacoma, which is run by a private for-profit company called the Geo Group. And yeah, I think with that, I will turn it back to Shakori, or turn over to Hannah, I think, who's going to talk to us about other types of civil detention.
So thanks so much, Tim, for starting us off talking about what the situation looks like with civil immigration detention. And so I think I'll just take a step back and think about, like, when we talk about private civil detention, it's first helpful to understand what we mean when we talk about private detention in general, because we have all of these different sorts of categories and they intersect in many ways, and it can get really confusing with all of these terms. And so private detention occurs in any facility not operated by the government, whether it's the federal government, the state government, or a local county or city government. And my cat is meowing in the background. I don't know if y'all can hear that, but apologies. And so a private detention facility, so not operated by the government, can be operated by a nonprofit company, so an organization that's not seeking to make money off of the detention of the people inside, or by a for-profit company like Geo Group, which runs the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma. And the people inside these private detention facilities can be held pursuant to either criminal legal or civil legal proceedings. And House Bill 1470 deals with all of the above, because the bill regulates conditions in private facilities, regardless of whether the operator of the facility, and I'm slowing down because I realize I'm speaking too fast for interpretation probably. So House Bill 1470 applies regardless of whether the operator of the facility is a nonprofit organization or a for-profit organization. And the bill does cover private facilities that detain people following criminal legal proceedings, such as Martin Hall, which is a juvenile facility that detains kids after they have received criminal legal adjudications. So House Bill 1470 is broader than civil detention, but it does include private civil detention. So Tim has already talked about immigration detention, but what can civil detention look like outside the immigration context? Like, what other types of civil detention are there, and are they included in this bill? A shorthand way to think about civil versus criminal detention, since, as Tim has talked about and shown pictures, and many of you already know, many of these facilities, they're called civil, they look punitive or very restrictive in nature, like prisons. And so the shorthand way to think about it can really be, what kind of court ordered the person to be detained? Was it a criminal court or was it a civil court? And so first, a person can be ordered detained through a civil commitment order. And this can happen when a court decides that a person needs treatment in an institution for certain behavioral health or substance use issues. House Bill 1470 exempts, or it does not cover, facilities that detain people for emergency behavioral health and substance use treatment, but the bill would cover other types of longer term detention. So not short-term emergency treatment, but longer term detention for behavioral health would be included if those persons were detained in a private facility. And then second, a person can be detained for public health reasons, and this would count as civil detention. So for example, if it was necessary to isolate or quarantine individuals because of a pandemic or for some other public health concern, this would be considered civil in nature. And this type of detention is exempt or not covered by House Bill 1470. And lastly, there may be other instances where a person is held in a locked facility, or where they're not able to just freely leave the building, where the door is locked, and they have been placed in the care of that facility through a court process or procedure. And that would technically fall under the definition of it being detention if it were in one of these privately operated non-governmental facilities. And so I will stop there and hand it over to our next presenter. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions about all of this jargon that we've just been talking about.
Thank you, Hannah and Tim, for explaining what civil detention is. And then the question is, if it's civil, then why does it look like a prison? So now we have Angelina, who will explain that.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. And thank you especially to Hannah and Tim for giving us such a clear explanation of those differences under the law. I myself am not a lawyer, so I sometimes feel like saying, if the Northwest Detention Center feels like a prison, it might seem like some of these details, these are legal distinctions without a difference, meaning they don't really matter. It's all the same. It really is a prison, or it's so close to being like a prison that we shouldn't use euphemisms for it. We should just say it's a prison. But I want to talk about another way in which that distinction between civil and criminal detention really does matter to those of us who are concerned about human rights, and in particular, concerned about what are the conditions like for the people inside that facility. Because in my role, I'm the director of the UW Center for Human Rights, and we are constantly doing research to try to discover what's happening inside that facility and how it can be improved, or the best way to improve it at this point would be to close it, but how we can ensure that people within the facility are at least treated in minimum accordance with human rights standards. Now, of course, we do know what's happening inside the facility because folks inside are constantly telling us about the conditions there. And organizations like La Resistencia are doing essential work to help those of us outside hear the voices of those inside and understand what's happening. But unfortunately, then we have ICE and GEO, who typically dismiss anything that they say because they, ICE and GEO, are constantly stigmatizing people who are detained, calling them criminals, suggesting that they're untrustworthy, and putting out a lot of misleading and false information about what's going on behind those walls of the Northwest Detention Center. So a lot of the work that our center has done in recent years is literally trying to obtain records from ICE of its own records, its own words, its own documents that speak to the conditions in the facility. And it turns out that's a really difficult task because while ICE itself is an agency of the US government, and that means we can request information from ICE and documents for ICE from ICE under the US Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, GEO, the company that actually runs the facility, is a private company. And that means they are exempt from the rules of FOIA, which means anybody in the public who wants to know what GEO is doing has no means of accessing that information. We can only access what GEO and ICE want to put forward. So even though these are our neighbors who are locked up in this facility, the law just treats the business that GEO runs like any other private business and says we don't have a right as members of this community to demand to know what's going on there. However, what we've been doing for the last several years at the Center for Human Rights is looking into the contract that GEO has with ICE to operate that facility and reading the fine print very carefully, seeing what are the requirements in the contract about information and specific documentation that GEO has to provide to ICE. And so we've gotten smart about using FOIA, or federal US law, to request those documents from ICE. Now, I want to be clear, it's not like they turn around and give them to us. In fact, we have had to sue them in federal court now 3 times. We're currently in litigation against ICE for access to records to which we are entitled, as is anyone else, under the terms of US FOIA law. So it's a difficult process to get them to comply with the law. And in fact, the process has become so difficult that they've even tried to sue us for simply asking them to comply with the law. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. What I want to do is share some of the documents that we have obtained through these efforts, and a couple of examples in particular related to documents that we released today. We have published the latest in a series of research reports about conditions at the Northwest Detention Center today, and you can go to our website and find out a whole lot more. I just want to share with you a few examples of what we've seen. So if we can see what you're seeing on the slide there right now is just our website where you can see our latest research report and the others. But if we can look at the next slide, what I want to do is pull out some of those specific, these are images of specific documents that have been released to us pursuant to FOIA litigation that we have brought against ICE. And there's many, many more documents like this. A big part of our job is combing through these documents and figuring out how to analyze and understand them. So these are just a few I'm sharing with you. The first is, as folks who are detained know, ICE makes a big deal, as does GEO, about the existence of a grievance system within the facility, like a way that people can complain if something is not to their liking within the facility. What our research into the grievance system shows is that it absolutely doesn't work. It's a pantomime of a real grievance system. And one of the ways in which it's a pantomime is that it simply allows ICE and GEO to point fingers at one another in ways that they both evade accountability. So ICE, the government agency, GEO, the private company, a person who is detained seeking attention to basic conditions of sanitation. As you see on the grievance on the screen, this is a person talking about concerns about unclean laundry, something we've heard from detained people for years. And the response here is, don't complain to ICE, complain to GEO. I could show you many more examples where somebody's complaining and that they have complained to GEO, and GEO says, don't complain to GEO, complain to ICE. So these parallel structures, while they stem from these legal niceties and distinctions between civil and criminal or private and public, what they serve in practice to do is just make sure that each party can point fingers at the other and nothing changes. This is just one example, but I'll give you another example if we could see the next slide. This is a set of emails that we received through FOIA recently in our most recent litigation against ICE, where what we see here is ICE employees at the Northwest Detention Center complaining to GEO about cleanliness within the facility. What's particularly interesting here, they refer, as you can see, to the bathroom being gross, complaining there's not janitorial surface. And then they say, this is an ongoing issue. I'm happy to contact the health department if you think this will cause GEO to provide the required janitorial services that I'm guessing are part of our contract. So what does this tell us? And again, these are just examples I'm putting as an illustration. We have many, many more examples to illustrate the same trend. Well, first of all, they show us, I'd say 2 things that I want to emphasize. First of all, they show us that while publicly ICE and GEO say everything's fine, detained folks, their friends and family and advocates have been saying for years that the facility is unclean. ICE and GEO have been saying there's absolutely no problem. Look at all these cleanliness standards in our contract. This is just false information that's being spread. But what we see with these latest emails that we have published today is that actually behind the scenes, ICE themselves was complaining about cleanliness in the facility. And not only that, ICE themselves was talking about invoking public health authorities as an attempt to get some attention to the cleanliness problem that they were experiencing. There are other emails from ICE where they're complaining that it's an unsanitary working environment for their employees. They say nothing about what kinds of living environment it is for the folks who are forced to live there, not only live there, receive medical care there, eat there, live out their lives there. So one thing, it shows they've been lying all this time. And the second thing it shows is that private contracts, in this case, the contract between ICE and GEO, as a means of guaranteeing decent conditions within this facility, simply don't work if those contracts aren't enforced. And this shows that they aren't being enforced. Not this one document, but the series of documents of which this one is a part. So these documents, these emails of ICE complaining to GEO about cleanliness at the facility go over the course of 3 years. 3 years of ongoing complaints. All that time, ICE was saying publicly there's no problem. And during that time, ICE could have chosen to punish GEO if they really wanted to bring them into accordance with the terms of their contract. The punishment they could have invoked under the terms of the contract is saying, we're going to deprive you of payment. We're not going to pay you because you're not fulfilling the conditions that are in this contract. ICE never did that. They chose never to enforce any disciplinary mechanism, despite the fact that behind the scenes, they were threatening even to invoke public authorities, saying it was unsanitary working environment, et cetera. So what this shows us is that A, GEO wasn't doing their job to clean the facility, and ICE wasn't doing their job to enforce the contract. When ICE says publicly, oh, you don't need to worry about conditions there because we have this contract that has all these umpteen clauses, and it does. They're not lying. I've read the contract. It does have umpteen clauses. But if they're not willing to hold their business partners accountable, even to the terms of that contract, and they're lying to us in our faces about what's happening behind there, we can no longer place any credence in that private contract as the only guarantee of basic conditions in the facility. And I think I'm going to leave my comments there, but I would be very happy to answer any questions that folks might have. I'll pass the floor to Alejandra Gonza.
Hello, thank you very much, Angelina. My name is Alejandra Gonza. I am the Director of Global Rights Advocacy. And whenever you see an international human rights lawyer around the webinar of the room, you will understand that there's really a lack of domestic remedies to not only try to get rid of the structural causes of the problem, but also finding a way of adjudicating these abuses. Through the work that I've been doing for La Resistencia for a long time now, we've been documenting detention conditions by going to the detention center and talking to the people, telling the stories that you heard here. It's about torture, inhumane treatment, solitary confinement, lack of access to healthcare, lack of access of really good food, lack of access of any type of remedies of a way to complain. And my role as a human rights lawyer for La Resistencia has been reporting those complaints to international human rights organizations and bodies that have the power to assess the human rights situation and also issue recommendations to the United States. And in some of the cases, even decide on an arbitrary detention of a particular person. We've done that, and of course, we were successful in the terms that we were able to get strong international recommendations coming from organizations like the United Nations, of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, really telling the United States to review and assess the immigration system and the detention system as a whole. And even for the pandemic, recommend the US to release migrants held for immigration issues and as a humanitarian measure. And of course, there's a lot of different recommendations that we were able through the years to get to push the United States to change the law, policies, and practices that allow the immigration system to continue, the immigration detention system to continue as it is. But of course, it's not an easy way, and there's the idea of adjudicating international responsibility to the US for the human rights violation. But it's even more difficult when you are pointing out also to a company like GEO. But with a lot of creative advocacy from La Resistencia, we were able to get the United Nations to send recommendations and ask for a response to the company GEO, and requesting GEO to act with due diligence, which means that they should have to identify, prevent, and mitigate all the human rights violations that we are reporting. But of course, that's part of international human rights legal avenues that we can find. But it's extremely difficult because usually it is impossible to exhaust any domestic remedies, or the remedies themselves don't work. We try so many times to get people released through different domestic ways, like parole. The habeas corpus, which is an amazing protection, does not work even to get people out. There's not really a judicial review or the protection of the personal liberty as a right. In our work, after documenting this through testimonies and what we build as evidence, as affidavits, we realized also the stories behind. Not only the stories behind, it's like how families that were living a normal, happy life were completely destroyed by the experience of detention. And so if we go to the next slide, I'm going to show what we started to do as our next step. In terms of international human rights law, our next step, it is filing a complaint before the only organization that could issue a recommendation regarding an individual petition or a case. As we are studying the domestic remedies that we supposedly need to file, and we cannot, and the exception of having to exhaust those domestic remedies, we also grab the sense of what all the people detained that we've been in contact with think about reparations, what remedies are. Usually you will see legislative efforts around immigration, and they are crafted around what it could be possible to pass as a law, not what really people want. And through the idea of having these affidavits turn into a storytelling project, we partnered with an artist and we started to telling the stories, but we started to focus the narrative not on what the experience was only at the detention center, what families went through when one person started to be detained for a long period of time, but also we started to compile what remedies are. And we were extremely surprised, right? From most of the testimonies we took asking about remedies. Remedy number one, even people without any involvement with La Resistencia, but who suffered detention, it was this place should not exist. So the idea of shutting down the detention center is not an idea around an organization. It's the idea around following what the people who were affected by detention is asking for. It's very difficult. That's why we have to go around and now talk about detention conditions and how we can limit and try to regulate those. And the other thing that was surprising is that not all the people were asking for citizenship, for example. And that was surprising because of the Citizenship for All campaign and things like that. It was an extremely fulfilling project for my students. I'm also a professor at UW Law School because it gave us a real sense of not only that we need to shut down the detention center, that we need to change those laws, but we also need to imagine what the future should be. And there's none of the rehabilitation elements of imprisonment available for civil detention, right? And so this is what people want. This is what they want. They want to shut down the detention center. They want to, the people deported want to be able to come back. They want to have opportunities to request parole and get and wait outside the detention while their immigration case is decided. But they want freedom. They want dignity. And all the ideas, and we have a collective testimony, and we have all the stories are around, we were treated like animals. The food I was eating, I wouldn't feed it to the dog. How many times we heard that? And still we're not listening, right? The government is not listening. And so the image that you have now is a compilation of some of the stories. Many of them, it could be considered kind of a happy story because there were people that, through the help of La Resistencia, were able to regain their freedom, even in very difficult cases, and they are released. But sometimes they say, I was released, but I'm not free. There are so many different things that I cannot do. I want to work. I don't want any help from the government, but I can't. I have my ankle monitor. They are surveilling me, or I had to report so many times back there, and I'm so scared. I'm living with fear. My kids are afraid of me leaving the house. And I can't have access to education. I can't have access to programs that will help me heal mentally. The mental damage of detention is really unaccounted for. And you can see the stories of people, and even when you visit a person several times and that detention is prolonged, how the mental health deterioration is evident. And so with all those stories, what we heard a lot too is that nobody is listening. And especially during the pandemic, that we couldn't visit in person, that we had to talk with people by phone. It was a really difficult time. So they asked us to show this to the world, tell our stories, and do something about it. So I will leave it there, but with an invitation. This is an exhibition that it's now available at the Wing-Luke Museum. It's a very beautiful exhibit. Exhibit that it's called the Resistors. It's great. Go. It's going to be available until October, and also in UW Law School. Thank you. I'm up. Sorry.
Thank you, Alejandra. So yeah, to piggyback off of what Alejandra said about conditions, that is something that we hear constantly. No matter who goes out and in of this place, it's the same complaints over and over again, to just point to that it's not individuals that is complaining, it's the whole facility. So I'm just gonna really quick talk about conditions. There's complaints about the food, like everybody keeps saying. There's been complaints of it being cold or moldy or having bugs in it, and even tools. I think we got a picture from somebody where they showed us that there was a screw in his food. The trays were breaking and decayed. And I think there was like larvae living in the crevices of like each separated like compartment of food where it goes on the tray. We've heard that there's molds like in the showers and stuff. The laundry is horrible. When it gets returned to them, it's like smelly or still wet. Or the clothes are tattered or has holes or stains in it from it being worn several times by other people. The bed mattresses are old. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And that's just inside of the detention center. Also, there's a bunch of companies that are making money off of this place. The phone system is ran by a company. Then you have the video calls, you got access corrections. And if you look at the diagram really quick, you can see all of the entities that are really making this place continue to run. But we're gonna pass it to Aaron now to explain to us the toxic stuff going on around it, the detention center, and not just inside of it. So Hannah. Sorry, Aaron. Aaron, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
It's because she's set as an interpreter and we're having trouble undoing that.
Okay. Okay, while we figure out Aaron's technical stuff going on there, we'll pass it to Manuel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Yes, I'm gonna talk about our leaders and the solution. The solution comes from the people inside the detention center. They are our leaders, and in these pictures you can see, and it describes all the ones that are in hunger strike. They are the voice. They tell us what they need to be done, and and we have to listen to them. We have to listen to their demands. And also we're gonna have them show a video of them talking about the situation inside the detention center and what they want from this hunger strike. So they are our leaders, and they are who tell us what is there to be done. Can you show the video, please? Can you put the video?
So what they're doing is when the cleanup crew comes in, they really do not even clean the bathrooms because they're stuck there. I've been here for a year and a half in the same room, and they're stuck there from the time when they stopped the workers program where the detainees used to clean up. They do not scrub the shower real well because we used to do it 3 times a day. They only do it once a day. The bathroom is being cleaned once early in the morning. That means it's getting dirty all day through the whole day. There's how many people in here using it? We have to use it continuously. So it's really dirty. It's unsanitary, and the chemicals they're using is not real chemicals. It's literally watered down, and you have the fragrance to it. And the other problem is with the food that they're feeding us is the small portions, like for little kids. Like we're grown adults in here. There's no minors in here.
So when the hunger strike happened, when the hunger strike started, we got in touch with all our leaders. Like you see, they are telling us what is wrong with the detention center right now. They all are demanding for the food to be better. They cannot, they don't have enough nutrition in the food that they get served. And most of the time they've been getting their food late at night. They want better blankets and sheets to cover themselves because the blankets and the sheets are only halfway of the length that it's supposed to be, so you have to decide if you cover your upper body or your lower body. So they are demanding for better treatment inside the detention center because, like we heard this Wednesday, you officers bust into one of the units and they throw smoke grenades and pepper spray So everyone in that unit was choking, and the smoke went through the vents because the vents are shared with other units, and detainees in other units were also um, getting choked because of the smoke. So they are our leaders, and they are who decide and how we're gonna take action on this. And please follow our call to action, email and call uh, Drew. Um, I forgot his name. Drew Pastak, and also call to the detention center. All the information is on our Instagram page. And now I'm gonna pass it to Erin.
I don't think Erin is with us yet, so we're just gonna move to the next bill.
Okay. Meanwhile, I can tell you. So they started a hunger strike on Wednesday, and when they started was F1 and F4. There were like 85 people in the hunger strike, and after that, other detainees got joined into support. And right now, I believe it's almost 115 people in hunger strike. So I'm gonna pass it to Tim.
Thanks, Manuel. So I'm excited to hear from Erin, and we will hear from her soon. But wanted to talk a little bit about one bill that that Resistencia and the Northwestern Rights Project and a number of other groups are pushing this session in the state legislature. The number of the bill is 5270. Keeping communities together, and what this bill does is ensure that Washington state resources aren't being used to do the federal government, to do ICE's job for them. And so the Department of Corrections is a place, and sort of you saw that map before, the detention center, Washingtonians who are not citizens maybe at in the Department of Corrections, and then after the end of their sentence, rather than being able to return to their communities and their families, the Department of Corrections may share information currently that means that ICE is waiting for them, and sometimes it's actually GEO who's waiting for them to take them to the Northwest Detention Center. And so this bill would ensure that Washington State is not being a part of that system, and additionally it would ensure that programming available for those who are incarcerated by the Department of Corrections, that all the programming that's available is available to folks regardless of their immigration status, or if ICE has said they're interested in talking to someone. So we're hopeful that folks will support this bill. We should soon get it hopefully voted out of committee and moved on to the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And I'm sure there'll be more information coming about how you can express your support in front of Ways and Means. And I know a lot of people signed in to support the bill in front of the policy committee, and looking forward to having that continued support going forward. And with that, do I hand it back to Erin, hopefully? If not, I will shift to the next bill. And so, so this bill, House Bill 1470, is another bill that that Resistencia, Columbia Legal Services, NERP, and others are pushing, in particular regarding the conditions at private detention facilities. So much of what we've been talking about this evening, this bill tries to address many of the issues that we've heard from folks who are locked up at the detention center and other private detention facilities. So, I think it's important, and the reason why, we're Hannah and I, sort of explaining that the legal backdrop here is that House Bill 1470 actually covers more than just the Northwest Detention Center. It covers a number of different private civil detention facilities in Washington state to ensure that regardless of which exact facility it is, this minimum standards of the conditions of confinement are met, right? And you can see the long list. There's a number of different things that we've heard from folks who have been locked up before and who are currently inside of what's important to them, what is not happening currently. And again, you've heard, years of these problems, right? That Angelina and the UW Center for Human Rights documented, of the barriers to needing to turn to international solutions for that. And this bill seeks to create accountability and that minimum standard of conditions. And so we're looking forward. There will be a hearing before the House Community Safety Committee on Tuesday for 1470, and there will be information going out on how you can sign in you can sign in favor of that bill and express your support for it, and there'll be information coming here soon about how you can do that. So hope folks will support. Happy to take questions, and very excited to hand it over to Erin to talk about the conditions around the Northwest.
Actually, I'm going to talk about the how to sign in right now. Let's just take it over so we can leave the rest of the time to our amazing Erin that's been so patient with us. So let's go back to the previous slide, please. Not this one, but the previous one. Thank you. So we have a link and we'll post it. We'll copy paste some place here. And what we need you all to do is to go to that link and you'll find this page. And this page, what you do is you choose Pro. And it means that you're gonna sign in as Pro for HB 1470. You fill out the fields there, which is your name, your last name, your email. If you want to sign as La Resistencia or not, that's okay. You don't have to. And for the address, all you need is your city. You don't need to enter your home address if you don't want to. And then just submit that. And then as many sign Pro we have, the better. So we really need you to do this. We will post also in our social media the links, but we just wanted to make sure that as good organizers that we are, means that everybody needs to go home with an action already done. But there's more actions. I'm just going to pass it to Erin right now so we can finally hear from her and about the horrible conditions, not only inside, but outside the detention center.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for your patience. If we could go back to the presentation, I have some slides to share. And I'll just say, so my name is Erin Dilworth. I work for Communities for a Healthy Bay. We're an environmental advocacy nonprofit here in Tacoma. And actually, let's skip this slide. And so, when I first started talking to Maru about this work and their campaigns, and hearing about the conditions inside of the detention center that are potentially that are making people sick. It's also important to keep in mind that there's a lot of conditions outside of the detention center that can contribute to the types of illnesses that we're hearing about. And so this map here is an environmental health disparities map. The darker the color, the worse off someone is. And what that means is, if someone is a 10, ranked in an area 10, like the Tide Flats, like where the detention center is, that means that they're experiencing the worst possible health outcomes because of where they live. And those health outcomes can be things like respiratory illness, chronic heart conditions, things like that. And so we know that where someone lives and what their surrounding environment can really impact someone's health. So can we go to the next slide, please? And one of the things that I wanted to do was try to explain, all of the different entities that regulate the environment around the detention center. And once I started digging into that, I would have thought it would have been a little bit easier to do. just given my experience in the field, and it actually wasn't. And we can actually, so you can see here, there's all of these different entities that are regulating indoor versus outdoor air quality. And you can go to the next slide, actually. And so what this map shows here is actually all of the different facilities within the zip code that the detention center is in. And that's that little yellow house icon there is where the detention center is. All of these red markers indicate a facility that has air emissions, polluting air emissions. The smaller kind of red bubbles are smaller facilities, and then these triangular kind of caution icons are like the really big ones that emit a ton of pollution. So you can see, the entire tide flats is just covered with facilities that are emitting pollution into the air. These are places like metal scrap yards, gas stations, a paper mill, fossil fuel facilities, places that make asphalt and concrete, bleach, dry cleaning materials, all of that kind of stuff. So all of that industry is happening in the tide flats surrounding the detention center. Can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, my slides look kind of silly. Sorry, they got cut off there. The water situation, we've heard that there is, smelly, dirty water coming out of the faucets at the detention center. So there's a lot of different entities that regulate water quality, and this actually isn't even all of them. This is just the ones that could be impacting water at the detention center in particular. And so, this is very complex. Often when I try to talk to someone about an issue, not necessarily just about the detention center, they can kind of go, not it, that's supposed to be Department of Health, or that's supposed to be Department of Ecology, or that's supposed to be Tacoma Public Utilities. So there's a lot of sort of kind of finger pointing and saying like, that's not us, that's outside our jurisdiction. And I think that the Northwest Detention Center really benefits from this regulatory complexity, because places are just saying, no, that's not us, we don't do that. Next slide. Soils are a little more simple in terms of the Northwest Detention Center anyway. We've got the EPA and the Washington Department of Ecology. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see. So these are the contaminated sites within the tide flats and surrounding areas. Again, the little yellow house icon is where the detention center is. The entire area of the tide flats is a Superfund site. And what that means is that the area got left so contaminated by industry, it was unsafe for people and other living things to live there, to fish there. Any contact with the land was unsafe. And so all of these little dots are places that have been identified as contaminated sites. Some of them have been cleaned up and they're safe. Some of them, are kind of going through it. Some of them haven't even started the cleanup yet. So again, the detention center is just surrounded by heavy industry, and it's in a place where residential facilities actually aren't even allowed anymore because of these environmental concerns. And the only reason the detention center is still there is because it was grandfathered in, meaning they built and got all their permits and everything before those regulations took hold. So you're not ever going to see another facility like the detention center there because it's legally not allowed anymore. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this too much, just because I know we're kind of running low on time. But the question that Maru has asked a lot of people is, would you live there? And I think just knowing what we know about the conditions there, the answer is probably no. And as an environmental advocacy nonprofit, if we're protecting folks in our community at all different levels, no matter where they're at, especially our most vulnerable, then we're protecting everybody. And so that's why I was happy to kind of join this conversation, and I'll just leave it there. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Erin. Here we go. Okay, Madhu is here to explain call to actions and whatnot.
Okay, so this February, we have a couple of things going on. Tonight here at 7, we're outside the detention center right now. And if you want to come and join us in the cold, rainy night, please do so. It's a lot of fun. Tomorrow and Sunday, we'll be here at noon again until we know that the hunger strikers have a resolution on what's going on inside. February 7 is the hearing for HB 1470 at 4 p.m. So please remember to sign pro. On Saturday 18, we have a Solidarity Day with Suru for Solidarity. It's a very important day because it's a day of remembrance of the executive order that during the World War II mandated all Japanese Americans to be placed in concentration camps. And since then, they have gone through their own process, and in these past years, they have decided to join forces with us and say never again and fight against these concentration camps for families, adults, or any human beings. On February 25th, we're gonna have actually a special also Solidarity Day with students from the University of Washington that are coming down to spend time with us and make sure that everybody, as they're learning about their academic education, they learn the most important thing, which is to follow the leadership of those that are directly affected by the oppression of these systems. If we can go to the next slide, please. Sorry, I was running. So there's a hunger strike right now. So we're gonna be here for a while. If you come either today or tomorrow, bring signs in support of the strikers. But if you cannot come tonight, what you can do right now is call and email ICE. And one fun thing to do is to take a selfie. Take a selfie with a sign of support, post it and tag POTUS, the President and Secretary Mayorkas of Homeland Security, and add our hashtag of shutdown in WDC. That's something easy you can do tonight as we're finalizing this webinar. In the next slide, please. There's the details, which are also in all our social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, even TikTok that now we have. I always say that because I don't use TikTok, but I assume it's a lot of fun. And there's all the information. Please email and call Drew Bustock. That's an important name to remember. He's the Seattle Acting Field Director for ICE. He's hosted here at the detention center. All those numbers, please try them, because what happens is that they deactivate the emails or the phone numbers. And when that happens, that means it's working. They don't want to hear from you. But when you start emailing and calling and they deactivate those numbers, means that they have to listen to us. And let us know if one of those numbers or one of those emails are not working anymore, so we can go and find new ones. The next, just to remind you, tomorrow and Sunday we'll be back at noon. There's the address of this horrible place, 1623 East J Street, Tacoma. Remember to sign pro tonight or tomorrow, please do so. And also you can tell others to sign pro for HB 1470. Share our social media posts, please. That's really important. It really creates a difference. Make the calls, send the emails, and just remember, we are here tonight right outside the detention center because only the people can save the people. That means only us are the ones that are going to solve this problem. At the end of the day, we know that the law might be struck down and we might not have really beautiful pieces of paper that say that we have rights. We only can believe and create rights for us and justice for us done by us, by ourselves. So solo el pueblo salva al pueblo. Thank you everyone so much. We're gonna be starting a rally now. People are showing up here. So if you wanna stop the slideshow and I can show here where we're at. We're right here at the horrible, whatever cage name they wanna name to this place, Northwest Detention Center, Northwest Ice Processing Center, prison, and whatever you want to call it, it's a cage. So we are here right now. There's a couple of people gathering already back there, and it's raining and it's cold, but we're really glad that you all made it. Thank you, Erin, for all the patience, and thank you so much to everyone that worked the tech, for Sam, Melanie, Tatum, Phyllis, Rufina, everybody that helped with this. Thank you all so much. And Shakori, of course, because she ran the show. And all of our panelists, Columbia Legal Services, NERP, Communities for a Healthy Bay, Center for Human Rights at UW, and of course, Global Rights Advocacy. So chinga la migra, guys, Martin and Barbara, thank you so much for also your patience and your amazing simultaneous interpretation. Thank you, everyone.